Welcome to the Destiny of Manufacturing podcast. I am Dean Phillips, and I am your host for today of course, the Destiny of Manufacturing podcast. But more importantly, I am also the technical director for the Precision Metal Forming Association. And fortunately with me today, I have a genius from Ulbrich Stainless Steel and Special Materials. He is the project manager over there, and he has been there now for almost 10 years now, right?
That's correct, Dean. Good morning. Good to be with you.
Mike, great to have you.
Joining from
Mike
Connecticut.
Wine, it is great to have you here today. Right off the bat, I usually ask everybody, what is your 5-year perspective of what you see from the industry?
Sure. No, I'll try to give it that genius spin you queued me up there with. That's a big mantle to bear, but I'll do my best. Yeah, definitely. We see it from, both the supplier raw materials aspect to our customers in the manufacturing industry, but also from their perspective, part of the PMA, networking with companies, hearing their challenges. The big one that comes to mind is, especially with your role, technical director, changes in manufacturing technology. Right. So we go from providing, a standard product, decades ago, stamped, standard tolerances to precision capabilities needed, tight tolerances. You have changes with, is it becoming 3D printing focused, additive manufacturing focused? A lot of changes in what customers are looking for, both ours and tier ones.
Right.
So that's a big one for me. I think the, how we move towards that together kind of highlights the PMA's strength. Being able to talk about things like that, we call them lunch and learns here at Ulbrich, where we put on a symposium almost of what we're seeing. If the customer's having a challenge with a new product development, how can we ramp that up together and make it sustainable long term? I think also too, you look at the 5-year kind of time back in with the changes in the industry. Consolidation is a huge focus point right now for a lot of our customers. We see it. Recently had a big company, Hops and Mott's, are acquired by the Vantage Group, for example. And we see this all over the place. We all know the big names, the MW Industries of the world, the Paragons, et cetera. The list goes on. That's going to be tough to navigate, but it takes, I think, a lot of communication effort by salespeople, essentially, and being able to really network your strengths and leverage your history of the product. A lot of times, you talk to a commodity manager, right? They don't know what they're buying. They're buying a part number. They're buying a SKU. They don't know what it is. It's a widget to them, and it's a dollar sign. So how do you coach them? You're an educator. You're teaching them the 10 years of history, the 20 years of history of this product line that started maybe at Ford, and then it morphed into this new world. So it's really you're putting the teacher hat on and having to have those conversations. But again, it goes back to relationships and being able to. I think, this is great. The web connections, Teams, Zoom. However, Ulbrich finds a lot of value in the personal face-to-face. We have reinvested in our, for example, field sales group to really have a physical presence with our customer base across the country and internationally as well. So that's a huge, I think maybe to sum it up, that's 5 year, but that's, we've seen in my almost 10 years with Ulbrich, again, the speed of activity, when a quote comes in and turnaround time, especially with these larger companies, that becomes a big focus. 10 years ago, you turned a quote around in a day or two. That's pretty good. Now the expectation is such that that's not good enough. It might need to be by the end of the day, by noon, to get that quote back to a customer. So it's really, again, that's over 10 years. So what's the next 5 years look like? It could be exponential, like a hockey stick, with how that develops and AI involvement as well with that, with decision making. Do you have buying influences that we're all faced with as suppliers? Do we have to then navigate this new unknown of AI decision making?
Good point. Now, you had mentioned there about the value of physical interaction at face-to-face meetings. Can you elaborate that on from the standpoint of how that is with the districts? Because you're very involved with the districts up there. So we do appreciate that. Thank you. And tell us a little bit about how that impacts you.
Sure. I think that, relationships matter is kind of the catchphrase, right? And if you have that connection with, it could be a company owner, it could be an operations manager, it could be a quality individual. But if you have that reliability and trust between parties, it goes a long way. If it's a problem, it's easier to talk about it, get it out there, put it out in the open and discuss it, hash it out, find a value add for both companies. Personally, I've seen that where, when you have supply chain uncertainty, look at, tariffs, look at, we had the allocations a couple of years ago. Does that come back? Getting out in front of it, head it off, is a lot easier than dealing with it in a reactive sense. So I find personally, we try to be focused on proactive and really, zeroing in on where do we have the relationships, who needs to be involved. A great example, Greg Boucher, we all know, head of the national chair, PMA, he's got relationships across the country with big manufacturers. If there's a problem with Ulbrich supply chain from, say, ATI, they have a labor strike coming up at the end of the month, Greg might get a phone call from a president of another company. They can talk Greg to president, and they have a relationship that's founded on trust. So when Greg's calling or vice versa, there's a lot of reliability that comes with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's great that you point that out, because that is one of the areas that I think people get in trouble, is not having that open and honest conversation about those challenges that are going on. And consequently, the longer you kick that can down the road, the worse it is, not only from the standpoint of being able to solve the problem, but even to address it and find alternative solutions.
Right.
It becomes very hard when you're constricted, and then the cost goes up dramatically when you have to now expedite things because you didn't address it early on. So it's a great point, Mike. I really appreciate you bringing that up. What are some of the other challenges you see going on in manufacturing now, whether it's in your district or across the board?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the local Southern New England district is first and foremost in my mind with direct experience. But you hear it worldwide, countrywide specifically, manufacturing is in dire straits for labor. That's a huge one. I know you talked about it extensively in some of your presentations, Dean, and it might be, a broken record at this point, but it's worth repeating because that is going to be an ongoing challenge. And I think you talk, kind of going back to what I said about, changes in technology. How do we upskill? Right. Because it's not so much, the labor dynamic might be changing again back in the 5-10 years ahead, but we need to be doing it now, getting the work involved with the local trade schools, for example. So Southern New England's doing a lot with local trade schools, trying to partner with apprenticeship programs for a lot of our member companies. I know a great example, Doug Johnson, Marion Manufacturing. They do a lot of work with the local Connecticut groups and any funds that can be captured by member companies through networking and leveraging with the state and local municipalities. There's a lot of grants out there. CCAT here in Connecticut is a great one for tooling and equipment, for example, or technology reinvestment. So, being able to get ahead again of the labor challenges will be huge. You look at, and I kind of hinted on the ATI side of it, we're coming mid-February here, 2025, labor union contracts expiring end of the month. We'll see how that goes. The current administration probably will not be a fan of extended labor strikes. We kind of can see that from past experience and current posturing. Being said, who knows? It's day by day. It's very fluid. We've seen tariffs roll out. So these are all going to be challenges that we're going to have to come together and really, again, get ahead on and mitigate as best we can. And the geopolitics. I mean, that affects manufacturing to the core. You have reshoring, nearshoring that occurred back when COVID happened. A lot of supply chains looked and said, the key word I think, Dean, was resilience is what we all heard a lot about. How robust is your supply chain? So having a dependency where you're getting, I found a statistic, and this isn't necessarily metals, but it was like 95% of our aspirin, for example, is coming from India. That's astronomical. So, but you parallel that with manufacturing with metals and metal forming. A lot of those companies now nearshored Canada, Mexico, US, or other, but look at what's happening now in the last couple of days, 25% tariffs across the board, kind of reverting back to Section 232 a few years ago. So a lot of challenges, not just in the district, but across the country for manufacturing right now.
Yeah. And it's interesting you say that too, because talking about the resiliency of your supply chain, one of the issues was, I can remember when they had the tsunami over in Japan, and then they had the subsequent meltdown over there, and the chip shortage then. And everybody's like, we're not going to let this happen again. We're definitely going to address it. And then years later, we're back to the same problem because we didn't address it. We said we were going to, but we didn't.
Well, I'll give you one even probably a little bit more recent than that. Look at a lot of our member companies who are involved in the medical supply chain, right? For maybe I'm going to throw out a name, Medtronic, for example. It's a big one that a lot of people have had anguish over, perhaps in the last 18 months or so. Yeah. Similarly, it was ramp up, buy, load those supply chains up, and then the demand spigot shuts off from the OEM. And a lot of the guys caught in the middle, Ulbrich included, customers up from us who supply Medtronic directly or indirectly, got stuck in the middle with a lot of inventory to burn down. And that's a cost. That's a cost that the manufacturing industry had to bear, unfortunately. But to your point, how do we get ahead of it? And I think we've learned a lot, bringing it back to Ulbrich here from a personal level. We've learned a lot from the past, and if you don't learn from your mistakes, not mistakes, but if you don't learn from the history, you're going to repeat the same mistakes. To your point with the Japan or semiconductor example, and we'll see that industry is supposed to be ramping up again too. So
keep our fingers crossed, at least.
That's right.
Speaking of technology, what are your kind of thoughts on where we're going with embracing technology within the stamping industry as a whole?
Sure. I was at it's interesting you bring that up. I was at a customer about 2 weeks ago, and we were in the conference room just having a meeting, and I noticed on their board, they had all their hot jobs and output and notes you see in these shops. And comment was at the top, and it was kind of bubbled out, and it was, either accept change or move on. And, it's kind of a harsh comment if you think about it, but at the same time, I thought about it for a minute and said, well, it's a good point because evolution is natural. It might be hard, but it does flow in its natural state, and you got to move with it. And I think accepting it is a big first step for a lot of people, me included, right? I mean, when I started, like I said, about 10 years ago, we didn't do Teams meetings all that often. They were occasional, but a lot of it was, the dial-ups or whatever with the phone systems. And it's just, embracing that evolution, i.e. Microsoft Teams, or Zoom, and really just kind of making it a part of your normal habit, your normal work life. Ulbrich's done a nice job of that. I've seen a lot of companies that we deal with, including the PMA, obviously, really capitalize on that. And it's become a very powerful tool for relationship development and work.
Yeah, especially collaboration. I will say that too, that you used to have to get on a plane and fly halfway across the world to go have a meeting with your supply chain. Now, with any of the tools out there, you can have a meeting halfway around the world to talk about a challenge instantaneously. You don't have to wait, schedule a flight, do all of that. You can address some things almost instantaneously. They can take you around the plant, especially now with like VR and AR stuff. You can go around the plant and even find solutions. I'm a huge advocate of using tools like AR to improve your workforce. For instance, if you have only one tool and die expert across your company, well, that person can't be everywhere, but you can have that person leverage their skill set to advise your other tool and die experts by going in and somebody puts on a headset, or they just hold up their phone and they can say, see where this pin is, or this guide bushing is, or where this is, and highlight it and say, you need to verify that because it looks like the material is pulling in there, or whatever the challenge is. And we could do so much more than we used to do and leverage the skill sets we have. So we really need to embrace that too. So
I could not agree more with you, Dean. You piqued a memory here. I have a couple contacts at the division of Lockheed. We all know Sikorsky, big helicopter manufacturer in Connecticut. We also have command up in Bloomfield by the airport. But Sikorsky, they same thing. It's this overlay in the digital sense, and they're even able to tell if a rivet isn't fully seated or a fastener isn't perfectly lined. And that's imperative with the safety protocols we need now, especially in aerospace. So it's a great point.
Yeah.
And training
that's
too, I
tremendous.
think, you know, passing on knowledge where if you have a experienced tool maker, like you said, and he's at one site, that cross-functional and training aspect, it's awesome.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. Mike, we could talk about this all day, but I know you're busy and you've got a lot of other tasks to deal with. Put on one of your other 16 hats. So, Mike, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate all you do, not only for obviously for Ulbrich, but for the Precision Metal Forming Association and our industry as a whole. We really appreciate you and your support. Thank you.
Dean, thanks for having me.
This has been the Destiny of Manufacturing podcast, and I've been your host here, Dean Phillips. Have a great day.